So it's lovely to see you as ever, Claire, and thank you so much for coming along. We've had our contracting session, so this is like our first full supervision session for you to bring a topic. Have you got a topic in mind or a choice of topics you wanted to work on today?
Yeah, I do. I have like a couple of things have come up for me recently, and I think that they would be useful to discuss. I was actually initially I was like, oh, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? But once you kind of reflect on a session, you realize that there's quite a lot. So can I tell you now what I'm thinking
absolutely,
about?
sure.
So there's two things which have been coming up, and I don't know if it's possible to explore both. One is working with clients who have quite a lot of emotional baggage. And baggage isn't a very nice word, but there's obviously a lot of emotions that are going on that are either coming to the forefront, and then I'm sometimes conscious of creeping towards the kind of counselling area, which is not what I do, but then not wanting to shut something down. And that I'm very conscious of that at the moment. I've got somebody who's had a very significant loss in their lives very recently, and he's come to me as for financial coaching, which is my specialism. And I can and I've noticed there's a lot going on under the surface, and I sometimes almost want to reach into the screen and do something. And I think I mentioned in our contract, like I'm really empathetic, and I think that is I think I said, like, I think it's a lovely trait, but I'm also concerned that I then actually take quite a lot of that emotion back with me.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how to manage my own responses sometimes to some of these trickier emotional situations, especially when sometimes they're really, really obvious, and sometimes it's obvious to me that there's something going on. And then I don't know how, to use some of the deeper questioning in a way that's respectful of boundaries, and I'm, conscious of, not wanting to trigger something, but thinking that it would be used anyway. So that there's a long way of saying that's one thing, is that the managing the emotions of the client, but also managing my own emotional response sometimes as a coach, and how I can kind of progress. And then a totally flip one as well, which we may or may not get to, is the kind of coach I am. Where I said my specialism is financial coaching, but I actually really do enjoy some of the standard kind of what one might kind of think of as life coaching, but kind of open coaching. And it's as a coach myself, I find myself slightly confused and slightly conflicted as to how to represent myself with clients. So, but that's like quite a different. That's almost like about me and my coaching practice. So, two perhaps relatively big topics, but they do come up quite often for me outside of the coaching Zoom call. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I'm wondering, I know you've called them two completely distinct topics, and I get how they might be in a way, but also, is there a connection? Is there a relationship between those two topics?
That's a good question. Is there a relation between the topics? Potentially there could be. I think that I emotionally, yes, because when you're working out the kind of coach you want to be, especially when you're, you find something you want to do, like coaching, and I'm really passionate about it. I think it can be transformative. And when you see transformations in people, it's almost like, your cup gets filled in such a beautiful way. And I want to do more of that, which is why I think I get concerned when I'm thinking about, oh, have I dealt with this right? Or have I, so when it comes to, I suppose, thinking about my own business, it means a lot to me. It does mean a lot to me. And of course, there's an emotional side to that. And then it feeds into, well, how can I best help people? Or what is it that I can offer and focus on that makes me the best coach I can be for them at the time? and that I can also progress as well. I love to learn. I love to improve and to glean information with others. So certainly emotions, of course, feed into the decision of how to, especially now I've been coaching for a few years. I've got much more experience now, so I understand much more about the journeys and how they go. I suppose my emotions certainly play into that, but it also, I do sometimes find myself like looking up, well, maybe I'll train to be a psychotherapist, so I've got psychotherapy as well as coaching. So I can like offer these multiple things. And then can I be a financial coach, a career coach, a life coach, and a psychotherapist? Because, that really interests me too. And I'd love to study that. And then I'm like, I may not be making my life simpler by going through, but that's what my head's like in lots of places. So does that answer the question to an extent?
Well, I think, I mean, it brings a lot more richness, doesn't it? It makes me think, when the people say, "Oh, find a niche," you're going like completely the other way. No, I'm just gonna have more. I'm gonna have more strings to my bow. So okay, so I suppose I was thinking also that like the connection there with if your coachee is coming to you for financial coaching, but yet then they're talking about whatever the loss is, whether it's a bereavement or a divorce or something like that, then do you know what you're doing? Do they know what's going on? Do they feel like it's financial coaching or life coaching or personal coaching? I think that's where one of the places I saw maybe there's an overlap between those two topics.
Well, so I've been conscious of that before. And when I did the ILM coaching and had a better understanding of contracting, which I think has been a really important, it's a really pivotal part of the process, even though it's the beginning, it's really important. I do feel like there is an opportunity to kind of explain the coaching role and answer any questions in terms of how they see it. But I quite often I have financial coaching clients come to me saying, or they answer my questionnaire and say, "Oh, I'm actually not interested in the emotional side.
Yes.
Not interested in that. I just want to do the practical. I've got some stuff I need to sort out, and I've got that's the practical." And it's like, that's fine. And I will always kind of gently suggest that we tend to habits and behaviors tend to be driven by emotions rather than practicality, and they tend to go hand in hand. And things may come up, and we'll just see, and how would you feel? And then that's part of the contracting is, it gives me an opportunity to kind of ask about that side of things. It's interesting because I feel like that might feed into, maybe I said this in the contracting with you, but I feel that it might feed into some of that value piece about the value I'm offering. So if somebody's coming to me for financial coaching and they want a very kind of practical thing, but I see there's emotions going on, or emotions come up, it doesn't have to be my insight, as you may or may not be able to imagine. I don't think I've ever had a financial coaching client session even when their emotions aren't kind of the biggest player. Certainly at the beginning of the journey, certainly at that kind of the part where it all comes out. We almost have to unravel to we have to unravel some of the unease to create a simpler path towards goals. So it does. It comes up a lot, and I feel like there is an awareness from them that might happen.
Yes.
I just think that sometimes, and maybe this feeds into the kind of business that I want, it's like, am I giving them value if they've come to me saying, I want to X, Y, and Z for my future, and these are my let's work on our financial goals, and this is what I'm thinking about, and then we spend 3 sessions going through some of the behaviors and the emotions that come with some of those, and then I'm like, oh, we're 3 sessions in and we haven't started working towards the financial goals, and then I feel like I'm not giving the value. But of course there's immense value. And that's maybe where my head turns around and says, well, if I offer more kind of a rounded coaching, and then if financial coaching becomes part of that, then at least I feel like I'm ticking the boxes. I'm not sure if that makes sense, or if it answers your original question.
Well, what we're getting, I think, aren't we, Claire? We're getting a lot of richness here. There's a lot going on, a lot of your thoughts and reflections, but also like a lot of awareness of what's going on for our clients. So there's some really important things. Let's get really clear on what we're going to do today. So shall we focus on one or the other, or do you want to blend the two organically? Which would be the best for you?
It's really funny because I actually, as you heard from the beginning when you asked me, I thought that they were, two separate things, but actually now I'm starting to think that what connects them is my consciousness about the value that the client is getting. And I don't, do you know what? I'm still not entirely sure. I feel like I do want to explore some more of that emotional side of working with clients. I think I do want to do that because I actually think as I become as my coaching improves over time, I think that perhaps that means that the connection is almost like I feel like each client, like it gets better and better and better, and then I think that when that trust is there, and I hopefully am creating a space and a secure and safe environment, and perhaps that's why I'm more conscious of the fact that more of the emotions are coming out in with some of my clients at the moment. So I do want to look at that, but perhaps naturally it will feed into the value and the kind of coach I want to be anyway.
So I mean, it sounds like the way we should do this then is let's focus here on the emotional aspect and have the business bit bubbling away. It's sort of maybe we'll ask at the end if there's anything you've learned that helps with the business, but we won't explore that explicitly. And if you want, we can always talk about that explicitly in another session. That's okay.
That would be good. I think it's really important because the thing is about coaching is, yes, we are coaches and we want to best serve our clients and look after ourselves in the process, but it's also a business.
Yes.
And that that it does need to, that side of it needs to work too.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's the right order. Thank you.
Cool. Fab. So where do you want to be by the time we stop at 10 o'clock? Where do you want to be? What do you want to know, have learned, understood about this issue of emotions with you and your clients' emotions?
Well, I think that's going to be tricky because every client is going to be different and you never know what comes up in a session, of course. But I suppose it's like how far do we take things? And we think about the open questions we ask, and an open question comes and a whole load of stuff comes out from that, and then we think about deeper questioning. It's like, is that an appropriate deeper questioning? Like I feel like maybe I need to think a little bit about some of the boundaries that I have as a coach within coaching sessions, whilst still looking after, respecting, and I hope I do those things. I hope I do it and I'm sure I do it to the best of my ability because my heart is in the right place, and I'm I want to be able to help people. But is there a safeguarding issue? Is there something I need to, if I'm dealing with somebody who's going through, one person has lost their partner in the last 2 months, and that is immensely difficult, but is insistent that they wanted to work with a coach now. Somebody else who's going through a divorce, which is very tricky. So you can imagine there's a lot of, let's talk about finances there, but my goodness, the emotions that are tied up in the finances. I mean, honestly, that is huge, as of course. So I think at the end, I either want to, at the end of our session today, like I either want to understand a little bit more about the boundaries within coaching or my coaching, so that I can give people an opportunity to express. So I feel confident that I am giving people an opportunity to express themselves enough without getting to a place where actually I'm too involved. I'm not in a place, of course, we don't give advice as coaches anyway, but it's almost like there's a dependence and sharing. So I don't know if that's clear enough in terms of an aim for the end, but I think that this is going to be constantly evolving for me anyway. But I've got a client after speaking with you, and I would like to kind of go in confidently feeling like it's okay to explore some of these things. But it's also okay to move on, create that boundary, and know when to kind of redirect, perhaps. I was always, my initial training was always, we're always talking about being client-led.
Yeah.
And I'm conscious that I want to be client-led. The client knows themselves the best. They're the expert in the conversation. But at the same time, do I know how to be most helpful to that client? Yes. And is there still an opportunity, not so much for leading, but as I use the boundaries to make sure that we don't go too far into that way and we still move towards goals. But that may be, is that it? I'm not sure if that clarifies enough, because I'm not sure I'm clear enough on what I'm trying to get to a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
I do. No, and I mean, I can sort of pick out bits, I can pick out like rules of thumb and safeguarding and where's the line and what's right and what's wrong. And also like a certain amount of self-management, but also adding value and so on. So yeah, I can hear there's a whole load of mixed stuff going on here. It sounds like it's worth exploring. If you did feel clearer, even on this outcome question, if you felt clearer and more grounded about this, how do you think it might feel for you?
I feel like I would be able to, or I will be self-regulating a bit better. I think because I'm all in, and I feel so passionately about coaching, about working with clients, about wanting to help people and so on and so forth, that sometimes I come off of, I'd actually like to be able to come off of a coaching session and then not spend significant amounts of time thinking about it and almost dissecting it. Could I have done this? Could I have said that? Well, what about this? Well, maybe I want to bring that up for next time. Well, I want to write this in my notes so I don't forget it. And then, the brain goes. And I think that, being able to manage myself a little bit better and being able to stand in my coaching shoes to come off a session and be like, to the best of my ability, I created an environment that worked for the clients that at the time, because obviously clients come to you differently every single session. And I would like to then feel that kind of almost much more complete than I think I currently feel when I come off a session where I'm question, thinking. And then what you end up doing is it's like you take your work to bed with you, So perhaps it's also might be useful, and I think you said a few things about it, but just like some of reminders of some of those techniques, some of those lines, some of those boundaries, some of that management of a coaching session, so that I can kind of turn off Zoom, or I might sit with somebody in my room here, and I like to write a few notes and then be like, okay, and I leave it, and I look forward to the next session, rather than tick.
So the debrief or the self-reflection after a session will feel less fraught, less tense, less, self-evaluative, just like you're analysing it in the same way you'd analyse something externally. You'd be less worried. Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because that reflection after a session, like when you're in training, it's really, so helpful to do that. And then you get into this habit of self-reflection, and then it's almost like, is it self-reflection, or are you questioning your abilities? And that's a bit of a shame. I feel that I coach well, and I have clients and people enjoy coming to me, and I do know these things. So, but at the same time, there's all these doubts are coming in, and it does happen quite a lot when those emotions kind of are quite big. Or does it? Because sometimes I wonder if actually I'm doubting myself on some of the more practical things and I'm more comfortable in the emotions. That's interesting. I'm not sure actually which way I feel now. Because I do enjoy uncovering or helping somebody uncover something about themselves, which then informs their decision making. So I do enjoy that part. So what is it that I'm thinking about? What is it that I'm cross-questioning? No, I do I do worry that I probably worry that because I enjoy the closeness and the emotional side of it, that I might be going too far.
Yes.
Or I don't stop in time. It's interesting, isn't it? When you try to work out what it is that you're questioning about yourself, because sometimes you do it like on the surface. This is what our clients do, right? So you've got the surface kind of thing, which you use what you think it is, and then and then you start going a little bit beneath that, and something else kind of pops up. But still, in terms of a result, I would love to be in a place where I don't where I reflect rather than kind of tearing it apart and thinking about it 2 days later. Does that make sense?
It does. It totally does. Okay, fab. So, look, I mean, there's a lot going on already. I mean, you can see what, you're well into thinking, reflecting, and I think, having awareness popping in. So we've got to a place where we're clear what we're working on, but also some of these themes are starting to emerge. There's a couple of things that I want to ask you about. One is definitely this thing about like managing your own reflections, whether managing your own reflections relates to the quality of your coaching or whether it just relates to how you reflect. I think that's something important, but maybe we'll have that bubbling away for a couple of minutes. But I did want to say something first about you saying about being client-led. My observation about that, I think it's a beautiful and it's a wonderful phrase, but it's almost too arbitrary. Like it's like saying as a parent we're child-led. Well, we are, but there's a moment where you have to hold their hand, right? There's a moment when you have to say no more sugar. So client-led has a limit to it, in my view. I'm reminded of, sorry about this, but I'm reminded of Henry Ford said, before he started producing his motor cars, he said, if I was to give the customer what they want, I would have made them a faster horse.
Oh, clever.
Yeah.
That is really, actually, that's kind of comforting in a way, because I think that the client-led thing was very big in my early training. And I remember even thinking then, oh, that feels tricky for me, because what if the journey doesn't actually help? And what and how, and so I suppose, though, what it's like some of the things that you learn early on, it kind of sticks in your head, and that client-led thing's really stuck in my head. And of course, that I do believe the client is the expert in the room. But then, even if I'm doing financial coaching, well, I'm also an expert in my financial knowledge and the education and the support and the management tips and whatever that I can give about there. So I like that Henry Ford quote, actually. And I also like what you just said about being child-led. But also having to hold their hand to stop giving them sugar, which I definitely need to do with my son, because oh my goodness me, he gets so hyper so it's like no sugar. But that's actually a helpful reflection. Thank you. Because I kind of would feel like if I was to have any steering, and if that's what we're talking about, steering, or then I was doing something wrong as a coach. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that this is my big learning, I think, about 6 or 7 years ago was the realization that there is no such thing as neutrality in coaching. Even if our questions are, well, thank you for sharing that, tell me more. It sounds as neutral as you like, right? But actually what we're doing is we're saying there's more to be said. We're encouraging you to talk more about this rather than we're moving on. So we might not be judging or evaluating, but we are managing. We're definitely managing the session. And when like here with you today, right, you're presenting 3 minutes of all sorts of fascinating and rich stuff, and I'm plumping to ask you about one of them. So so we are client-led, but we are asking only about what we ask about, which means you know, so I think I think, yeah, it can be like a helpful steer to a certain degree. And I think probably what client-led does is it stops us being, you know, talking too much and giving advice and being directive, but and being very responsive to what we hear. But it's not right to the nth degree.
I'm just thinking about, I'm thinking about when you ask a question, so there is an element of leading the conversation. But then I'm also thinking about what you just said about, you kind of pick something out of what I said and said, well, if I've encouraged a client in this direction and then I've left something out, again, is it the emotional part of it? Is it the practical side of it? Is it, you know, then maybe what I'm offering isn't like I'm not being complete enough. But then of course you can't cover everything. And I suppose that it's important to trust as a coach that we have enough kind of sensitivity to what might be said, but also very importantly, what's not being said. Yeah. And some of those kind of visual cues or that we might be able to pick up on, that we are, I'm almost persuading myself here that the questions or the follow-up questions that we choose to ask are the right ones at the time, or that feel right at the time.
Yes.
But then again, I think that perhaps for me, I either want to go further into something because I'm intrigued and because I think it helps, and also because I'm quite open as a person. But not everybody that I'm coaching is as yes. Open or as comfortable with talking or whatever it might be. So but I can, you see, and that sometimes that is a client-led thing. They don't realize they're leading, but I again might pick up a sign. Perhaps I am doing that anyway without noticing. There's me kind of worrying about whether or not I am giving too much time to the emotional or not enough time to the emotional, whatever. But perhaps I'm picking up on what it is that the client wants, needs, or is prepared to do at the time. Yes. As you're probably doing with me, when you kind of hear all the stuff that's coming out of my mind, and you're like, well, which strand can we, you know, play with, and how far am I capable of kind of talking or thinking through that before we get redirected?
Yes. Yeah. So so I mean, there is something there. I mean, you talked about tools and tips and approaches. Well, there is something there about giving choices. So if we think about what you've just said, you talk quite a lot about the decisions that you make there, and you talk quite a lot about noticing what's going on for the client, and then you talked quite a lot about the tensions. So it seems to be like there's sort of three different things going on there. So I could say to you, you know, which should we focus on now? You know, which do you think would be the most useful?
Was your last one, did you say the tensions?
Yeah, like the tension that you have. Like there's an internal tension here, isn't there? Like, am I doing the right thing? Should I ask this? You know, should I put it back to them? Is it client-led? Is it my thinking? All of those type of things.
Yeah, that's probably the one to focus on, because going back to the question from, 20 minutes or so ago, which is whether or not some of my behaviors might be also feeding into, or some of my emotions, or whether or not there's crossover in terms of my work, and what happens in a client session. Sorry, my business and what happens in the client session, and also my kind of self-regulation. I think that my tendency to overthink, as a human, not just in a coaching, but I will overthink significantly. Not that I know what's going on in other people's brains. Maybe they overthink just as much as I do. But I think that it's just interesting. You use the word tension. I didn't think about it as like a tension. That kind of brings up thoughts of kind of discomfort. and you know, unsureness, and perhaps that is why I self-reflect in the way that I am. But I'm not quite sure what that tension is, because when I'm with a client, I'm really comfortable. So, you know, like somebody asked, like, you know, do you like what you do? Like, my husband doesn't like what he does. Like, do you like what you do? It's like, goodness, I love what I do. You know, I come off a session, I feel, even though I might be tearing things apart and overthinking, like I love what I do. So where's the tension? I wonder where the tension's coming from.
So and just to be really clear, that was my word, right? You didn't say tension. It was,
Yes, but it's been a useful one.
but you, and your reaction was a bit like, did you just say tension?
Yeah.
Well, so I might not be right, but it's definitely, it's something, isn't it? It's something that is like, you know, something that's stopping you from just being settled and just relaxing into, I'm fine, I'm all good.
Yes, and I think that may be why I thought I was bringing to the table, well, dealing with the boundaries and emotions of the client and stuff like that. But it's probably not so much that. It's more, it's probably more about me. I don't know if that's me as a person, me in a session, me in business. It's funny because you're right. I didn't say the word tension, you did, but by you saying it, it feels like you've almost hit on something which I may not have been comfortable in the past to think about. It's easier to blame a client being emotional in a session than it is to think about what it might be that is about my personal response to things in life that might be making things difficult.
Yes. Okay. So and you know, there's, however much we might think that we can sort of dampen down our default responses to life when we're in the coaching or the supervision room, clearly we're heavily influenced by them. So you know, that's possibly not for exploring today, but I think it's a good awareness to talk about. Yeah. But you're right, we shouldn't lose sight, should we, of the fact that you did bring to the table your clients and their emotional responses. So shall we explore for a few minutes, like what goes on if you've got a client who, you know, I don't know, for some minutes they're talking about you know, like the divorce person, you know, they're talking about the C1 forms that they need to fill in and the negotiations and maintenance and all that business. But then then a few minutes later, it's like, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, there's the loss, there's all those things that go with divorce. What happens to you when you get presented with, you know, the factual money information, but also the big personal information? What happens for you in the coaching chair?
So in the coaching chair, I would always be hearing what they're saying and offering an opportunity to explore further. And I think the divorce one is big because money and emotion and anger and all that, I mean, my goodness, they're so interlinked. It's really impossible really to separate. Yes, I mean, we can sit there and work out a budget, you know, with a limited number, you know, we can do that. And that absolutely has its place in financial coaching, is exceptionally helpful because it gives an opportunity to feel like that individual has some kind of control in a situation where perhaps they feel that they don't have an enormous amount of control. So there is a place for that. But I think I work against myself a little bit because as a friend, my best friend says to me quite a lot, and she says she loves this about me, but she also finds it very frustrating, is that I tend to play devil's advocate. So when something is brought to me, I naturally will look at the other side for reasons as to what might have created this scenario. I do it with the kids as well. You know, if I hear about some misbehavior, not their misbehavior, but misbehavior at school, my initial thing is not, oh, what a difficult child. My initial thing is, oh, what is the cause? What is happening on the other side that we need to be thinking about? And I actually, in a coaching session, I might need to fight against that a little bit, because you'll be unsurprised to hear that if somebody who's going through a divorce comes and talks about the anger or the difficulties and the emotions over some kind of something which feels unfair or tricky around money, for me to say, yeah, but what about the other side? Because maybe the reason they're doing this is like you said, that's not gonna happen, right? So,
possibly not. That's your wisdom.
So,
right?
so I don't do that. You'll be pleased to know. But it's something that I know is consciously ticking in my head, because it's almost like, if you can understand the reasoning behind something, then you can help it move forward. So I think that it's more about that. But I think it's so, divorce is a big one. I actually work with quite a lot of people who are either going through or have separated, and it's so important for, and most, actually, I don't actually think I've worked with a man on that. So I have worked with men, but not in, I think I've always worked with women who are divorcing. And it's really, I guess, important to me personally that they feel a bit better about themselves. And there's such negative internal dialogues and external. I hear them, but you see it ticking. You can see things with me ticking, right? We're ticking all the time. And I really, really want them to feel better about themselves and speak better about themselves, and work through the discomfort that they're feeling and the unease that they're feeling, and find a place of comfort and ease and release. And I think I can be really helpful with that. And then I sometimes wonder, have I just moved into counsellor? Not counsellor, I'm not advising. I'm very, very, I used to be tempted to do that, but I think I'm much better now at making sure that I'm not kind of, leading in that way. But goodness, I really, really, really want to help them. So I probably find myself doing a lot of, I talk about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and I talk about the mind, I talk about the way in which the brain works. I find myself doing a lot of, if your thoughts can go in this direction, we can help program them. I'm like, I feel a bit, I don't think I come across as desperate to help. I really, really, really want to help. And maybe that's where, those emotions come into play for me after the session. Did I help enough? Did I push too hard? Did I not encourage in the right direction? Did I give them an opportunity? Did I help them with their money issue? Because that's what they came to, and that's what is also really, really stressing them out. Those emotions are big emotions. And I think, as coaches, quite often we are working with people, or certainly I have in my experience, who are at some kind of a crossroad, that there is a significant change facing them, or has just happened, or about to happen, or might happen. And that there's kind of quite a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. That I like it, but I do wonder a lot whether or not I'm doing that right, which is not really a very coaching expression, but I do wonder it.
So I've got about 10 questions.
And I probably could have just chatted for a while longer as well.
but before we move on, I just wanted to check in with you when you were talking, like, just those last couple of minutes about, like, you really want to help, you really care, you really feel it. Can you just recall how it felt, like how it felt in your body when talking through those last few minutes?
Just now?
Yeah, just now.
Yeah, it didn't feel bad. It felt this will make you laugh. It's like, well, maybe I should specialize in divorcing women. Maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe I'll do a course in relationship management, because I really, really like working on this kind of thing. I don't feel uncomfortable. I feel quite comfortable in it. I think I'm quite good in those situations, actually. I don't think that, though I will question when I come out, I think I may well be questioning because I always want to do better rather than I think I've not done well.
Yes.
So when I was talking about it just then, I kind of was talking about it in a, like, I'm looking forward to doing this again kind of way.
I mean, and thank you for that. And the reason I asked is because I know I had, you know, I never know if it's a really good guide or not, but I had quite a heavy physical reaction when you were talking, and it felt like it didn't feel bad, but it felt quite weighty. It felt like, okay, this really feels like a big responsibility, and I
It's a
really sort of,
responsibility.
yeah, and I felt it in my stomach of like, okay, this really feels like something.
It is a responsibility, and it is a responsibility, and I think the fact that I've got the financial side of it too, is that weighs quite heavily as well. And I don't do, you know, what lawyers and accountants need to do. Obviously, in a proper divorce situation, that's you know, an integral part of that process. But actually helping people kind of feel empowered and feel like they've got the skills to manage, you know, when they've got, you know, they have to set up a new business and they've got 2 children at home and they've suddenly not got enough coming in and they don't have a, you know, a security like they used to have. There's the financial onus that's very strong too in terms of responsibility. So there's both that emotional support, guidance, encouragement, the exploration, alongside the fact that most people come to me initially because of the wanting the financial empowerment. So that's almost like an extra level of that responsibility of on my shoulders.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that, and I'd really encourage you to, you know, maybe when you're in coaching, and particularly when it gets a bit like this, is you might not do it in the moment, and you might not comment on it in the moment, but it's worth really reflecting afterwards. How did I feel? Like, how did I feel physically? What was my emotional state? And start just, you know, maybe diarising about that and picking up that type of thing. I mean, it's not a question that we ask on our reflective forums because I think it's quite an advanced question. Starting to really think and having some sort of guide about if you feel heavy or light, or like you say, some of these words you described, there's a bit of a desperation, is I so want them to change. Really noticing that and just starting to get a picture of yourself about what's going on for you. Do you think that might be helpful?
Well, I was actually going to ask you, like, what is the benefit of recognizing how you kind of physically feel?
So there's, I mean, this is, it's relatively advanced, and I'm only just getting my head around it, but there's some work around using ourselves as a guide. Tatiana Bachkarova has written a paper called Use of Self as an Instrument, the idea that we like, that's what I just did now, you know, when I thought, you know, there's something going on for me when you describe that, and I you know, I don't know, but I want to ask about it. So there's a bit of that, and sometimes we might just pick up an emotion from our client that sort of just gets lodged in us that might be really useful and it gets us somewhere, but it also might just be distracting, and that's called the parallel process. So there are a couple of relatively advanced things that we start to think about, you know, when we get the level, the stage you're at, that can be a guide, but I don't want this to mean that you've got another course to go on.
No, but obviously tick's going on in my head. But I was just thinking my sister is a very advanced health coach, very specialized, and she deals with a lot to do with the mind-body connection. You know, and how some you know, illnesses or thoughts or whatever, they manifest in your body and they create an issue. And if we can kind of work with our thoughts, we can potentially reverse some of the effects on our body. Which is, you know, that this is not woo-woo stuff, like this is a proven link. You know, and so I do find it interesting, but I'd never kind of thought about it in terms of a reflection on myself, like what is it that I feel after a session. But I am quite good at that in my day-to-day life. So if I feel, you know how sometimes like we all carry stresses in certain places, our throats, our shoulders, our chest, whatever it is, and for me mine can quite often be in my chest. And if there's something going on that I haven't noticed consciously, but I feel it physically, And then I try to give myself a moment to work out what is causing. There is a thought that's causing that. So, and I'm getting much better at noticing things like that myself in my personal world and life. And I quite like what you said there. I think that's why I asked you the question but because I think that is beneficial, because if I am to take on something or respond in a certain way that gives me a physical reaction, it's almost like it's an opportunity to work backwards and try to work out what it is, and maybe find my own solution to that, or let it go, which is what I really want to do, is to learn to let those things go.
Okay, well, I'm pleased. I mean, you know, it's like any of these things, you know, we worry about saying, you know, sharing something and sharing an idea. But if you're interested, I'll send you a couple of bits on that.
Yeah, thank you.
So of those 10 questions that I had bubbling away, I could probably distill it to one, which is something like thinking about like the awareness of the emotions that you have, the awareness of the deep care and the wanting to move to that person from, you know, from pain towards less suffering. To what extent do you think you can now do that, but still hold whatever the boundary is?
I think that the point about the client-led question has actually been quite helpful, because that feeds into giving me a bit more confidence to trust my instincts, as opposed to letting as a whole, that's not the right word, but just, you know, but it is, it's like just allowing just to, you know, go down whatever avenue. And I've noticed even in the session with me, like I obviously, and I'm sure everyone does, we go off on all sorts of tangents, and you've been refocusing me, which I've appreciated. So I think that it's helped me feel a little bit more confident that I don't necessarily need to be client-led, and I'm still prioritizing the client and treating the clients as the you know, the expert who knows themselves the best, and helping them whilst also being able to direct and trust the instincts that I have. And I think it is okay. In fact, not just okay, it's extremely important to give the opportunity for emotional exploration. That's, you know, part of what we do. Of course it is. It's not like we don't do that. It's just like, oh, you know, what's your goal? Oh, let's just walk towards it. Like, it doesn't work like that, you know. So it's like, there is definitely an emotional process that we need to do. But it's I think that I'm probably doing just fine. I probably don't need to question, although we all always should question ourselves and reflect and grow, but I don't need to doubt quite so much, I think. I think that's it. I think I'm going to know, to the best of my ability, as much as I can, when and how to offer questioning that's going to be helpful to my client, that's not going to go too far. And if for some reason it's just starting to feel like it might be too far, I'm also going to understand how to bring it back and how to refocus and redirect it. So I actually, that feels a little bit better there. That's, as I said, I've got a client after speaking to you, so I get to put it to work.
It's great to do it.
Yeah.
So to close the loop on a couple of things, I mean, you were worried that it might be going towards something that's too therapeutic, and you have talked both, you know, death and divorce, and these are things that are classic that people go to a therapist. Are you clear enough on like when trauma turns up, when dysfunction turns up, when you need to say, actually that work is for a therapist rather than for me? Is that evident enough for you?
Yeah. Do you know when it becomes evident is I no longer feel comfortable. It's, I think that we have we reflect a lot. We all come with our own journeys, right? We've all had our own traumas and our own experiences, and things we might notice things from our own journey and our client's journey. But I still think that we are therefore, I can be sensitive enough to understand when. And I even did it with a client recently who was an exceptional individual, but a lawyer, but worked in very, very difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
And I think that she wanted to talk to me about some of the things that she'd seen. And then the process, and then at some point, I can't remember what point it was a few weeks ago now, but I remember being like, if you want, have you got other support offered to you?
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity for you to explore this further? When I realized that something needed to be explored further for her, and I wasn't the right person for that. And she did. Thankfully, they were offering her support at work. What was your question? So do I feel like I know when to, how to recognize that the trauma or the level of emotion when it's no longer appropriate?
Yes.
I think I do, actually. I think I always have. It's just that I really want to help. So naturally you kind of think, oh, a bit like when you were talking to your best friend as a teenager, it's just like you want to get into the real nitty gritty of it, but actually that's not what I'm there for.
And I think what you said earlier as well is really helpful. The idea that, it's absolutely fine to explore quite a lot of emotions in coaching, and that's going to be part of the bread and butter of it. Okay. So we're coming towards the end now, and we've gone a long way, haven't we? We've gone through quite a lot of stuff. So thank you so much for getting stuck in. I just really wanted to pick up 2 final questions, like what will you do with all of today's work, but also what have you learned?
Well, I'm literally going straight into a session, so that's going to be quite interesting for me because this is a session with somebody who's grieving. So I'm going to kind of stand confidently in my questions. They've come back for multiple sessions. If I wasn't the right person, there's always opportunities to say this isn't working. So I'm going to confidently go into this sensitive but important time with this client. And what have I learned? I am learning to to doubt less and trust more in terms of my my abilities as a coach, because when you're coaching, you're going with the flow. It's not like you're like, well, hold on a second, let me just think about all the different questions that I might be able to ask you right now, and let me just think, because it's quite conversational, it's quite natural. Yes, less doubt, more trust, that naturalness is taking the path that is best, considering the information and the relationship and the moment and the time. Yes, and I'd like to learn to do that more. I know that the doubt and the self-doubt comes up quite a lot for me, and I don't necessarily have that. There's the proof in the pudding. I don't think I've had sessions where it's like, oh my goodness, that was really awful. Like, I don't actually think I've had that. So I do need to trust. Well, thank goodness I've not had that. So yes, more trust, less doubt, work on that process.
And can you imagine yourself sitting on the sofa at the end of a day with your notebook, reflecting in that slightly less anxious and slightly more detached way? Massive leading question, by the way. You can say no.
Yeah, do you know what? I don't actually sit on this at the end of the day. What I try to do is I tend to reflect straight after a session. I always make sure I've got a space after a session. I don't do back-to-backs because I know that I need to kind of decompress myself a little bit, and just also I forget things very easily, so I like to write a few notes. And as part of that, it is reflective. But you know what? I'm not sure that I reflect enough. And I think that then what might end up happening is it comes up for me in different ways later on, or the next day or whatever, because I haven't given myself an opportunity to think through things. So I might be writing notes about what the client said, but not necessarily about my reflections.
Yes.
So actually, if anything, I think I might just, after my next session, I might ask myself how I physically feel. I'm quite intrigued by that, and I believe that can be very, very helpful in just working out how we feel about something. When we think about how we physically feel, we can work out how we emotionally feel ourselves. So I think that's probably something that I might bring into my reflective practice.
Okay, so today really has been then the takeaways about changing a bit of your reflective practice, aware of your doubt, being able to stand tall a bit in knowing that you will work on emotions, and that's fine, and an awareness of the therapeutic thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you feel? 10 o'clock, finish our supervision. How do you feel now?
Yeah, I'm ready for it. I'm ready for the day. It's lovely doing supervision first thing in the morning. That's actually great because I'm much more clear-headed. And it's quite nice because it's almost like it bolsters you a little bit. It helps a little bit with the confidence to go off into the next session. So yeah, I'm feeling good. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, real pleasure. And thank you. And that was a lot. There was a lot of work, wasn't it? And you did the work. You did a lot of work. You did a lot of thinking. And I didn't ask many questions because you popped to plenty of your own questions. That's what's always joyful working with coaches, isn't it? You come up with questions. It's fab.
We do.
Well, thank you so much. Always a joy, Claire.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.